All right, let's move on. So let's now talk about direct object references. And direct object references is an interesting one. You often see this go wrong with banks. So we've seen various...
It doesn't sound good.
No, it's a bit unpretty. So we've seen this go wrong with things like banks, insurance companies, financial organisations. And it's pretty much as simple as you've got a URL, there's an ID in the URL that refers to one of your records, and if you change the ID, you get someone else's record.
Right, yes.
Now that is generally not meant to happen. We don't want to get somebody else's record.
No, absolutely not.
So let's have a look at how it works in your site. So what we might do is we'll just jump over to...
I've actually seen an example of that in, I won't disclose which one, but a major, let's say, software vendor's event where you could register as a speaker.
Okay.
It would pass password and ID around in the URL.
Who was that? Sorry.
And you could change it and you could get someone else's. You didn't even have to get the password right. So yeah.
Nasty.
Nasty. Very nasty. I'm not sure how that got through QA. Even.
Yeah, it's alarming, and I have definitely seen it happen with financial institutions as well. We probably shouldn't name them.
No,
some of them have been in the news anyway. All right, so here's a good example. So I have drilled down into a particular item category here. And let's actually drill down into edit, because I would imagine that drilling down into edit is something that only I should be able to do. So the URL, you've got a nice semantic URL. So I am Troy Hunt 2, apparently. I am adminning categories and I'm editing number 5176. Now I shouldn't be able to take this and load it up in another browser that is not authenticated as me. So what we might do is we'll go back to that incognito.
I know where this is going now.
Yes, but do you know what's going to happen? Will log me out.
No.
Okay.
This is interesting.
All right, so this is good. Now, mind you, what we've done is a pretty basic test. We've gone, if someone is not logged in, are they able to look at the record of someone who would be logged in?
Which it seems that they are not.
And it seems that you're not. And in fact, we can see here the return URL. It's actually passed it in the return URL, because for ASP.NET, it tries to load it. It says, you're not authenticated or you're not authorized to access a resource. We're going to send you over to the login page, and then you can log in and get it.
Yep.
Now, the semantic is that was a pretty basic test in that what would happen if you were logged in as someone else? Could you view someone else's record? Because it depends on what's being checked. And what will often happen is they will check, is the person authenticated or not? Yes, they're authenticated, therefore they can load the record. But are you authenticated under the identity that actually owns the record?
That's right, yes.
So that's the semantic. Now, the other interesting one here, and one that's very, very often missed, is APIs. So does the API implement the right access control as well?
Which is becoming more and more prevalent to use.
And the great thing about APIs, well, it depends on your perspective, but one of the great things about APIs is that when developers write them, and let's take rich client apps. So developer writes APIs on the back end, and then they write something that runs on, say, your phone, right, as a rich client app. Now, it's just making HTTP or HTTPS, doesn't matter which in terms of direct object references, making those requests to the server. The developer goes, I've built the whole thing, like I own the ecosystem end to end. So it's only ever going to work in the way I've designed it, right?
Right.
And then someone comes along and they do something like, and I've got a course on this, hack your API first. They go in and they proxy it all through Fiddler and they look at all the requests and they go, hey, I can see a request and it looks a bit like this one here. I'm just going to now make a little tweak and I'm going to issue the request again.
And see what happens.
See what happens. So you're good there. So that's good. So let us actually move on and have a look at security misconfiguration. So we spoke about that a little bit earlier on.
Yep.
And there's sort of some funky stuff that happens with your app. There's some bad stuff and there's some good stuff. So the good stuff is that when an internal exception does get raised, so for example, when we tried to log on with a password of script earlier on, we didn't get an internal error message which said there was a request validation exception.
No, no.
So we know that this is what's happened because this is how ASP.NET works.
It just happened to go to the search page instead, which is unfortunate.
It just did other really weird stuff. but it wasn't a security risk. That was more of a usability problem. So a security risk would be, say in ASP.NET, if you did not have custom errors turned on and you got an internal stack trace. And in fact, we saw that over here on my website here. So this one does not have custom errors turned on, deliberately, because it's there to demonstrate this.
Yep.
And the risk, of course, is that we're now seeing internal exceptions that we can start to probe. And in fact, in that Hack Yourself First course, I show how we can get internal exceptions that tell you which columns exist, which tables exist, and how you can start sucking data out. So you've got that bit done well.